welcome to my cellar one more time. Got a number of interesting places we're going to hop around tonight. So, buckle up, Buttercup. I don't know if I have a question, but the thing I love most about your videos is that no matter whether you like something or not, as long as other folks have fun with it, you let them. Oh, yeah. You don't crap on anyone's fun, and that's admirable. I myself have run 5e when I play with my friends because it feels no matter how I sell old school style games, nobody wants to bite. I could just say, hey, we're playing this tonight, but it might not be fun to do that to them. Oh, I got it out. Well, I understand what you're saying a little bit, I think. And thanks for the... yeah, if you're having fun, fine. There's a whole lot of gun games out there that I think are just dumber than shit. And I can't understand why anybody wastes time playing them. But that's okay. I don't have to. I'm not a self-appointed game guru. Okay? If you're having a good time with it and you're having fun, that's what games are supposed to be. Whether it's pick-up sticks or jacks or card games, or bocce ball. Games are to have fun. That's why they're there. They're a diversion. And if you're having fun, who can say you're wrong? Now, if you want to try and shake up your friends, change the genre on them. Play post-apocalyptic. Mutant Crawl Classics. Go. Let them play a character that seems, right from the beginning. Well, you can do it a number of ways. You can do it in a funnel game, which I think is hilarious. And I love the idea of the funnel. You go in with a stack of character sheets already filled out, and whoever's alive on the top of your sheet at the end is your next guy. Great fun. Great laugh. Now, there's some things in there, especially the concept of how they use luck, that do make a difference. So you have to maybe give them a little briefing. Change the genre. I'd say, if you're trying to get them to go into old school, which I'm going to assume you mean old school, less rules, more fun, loosey-goosey. We're here to have a good time, not, establish a creed. Then all you can do is change the setting on them and run them through something with a loose set of rules and see if that doesn't have, appeal to them. We would occasionally shift gears like that for a week or two into something totally different just to change it up. And if the week or two was really successful and it meant fewer or lesser rules, well, there you go. You're on your way. All you can do is try, A Voice in the Wilderness. One thing about if you can get them to play post-apocalyptic, go berserk. Let them do a mutant, build a mutant that's, shoots lasers out his eyeballs and a flamethrower out his hiney. Okay? Doesn't matter. There's always something worse. Always something worse. Let them be what they think is the equivalent of a dragon. In terms of buffed and I can do this and I can do that. There's always something worse when you're playing, mutants and post-apocalyptic. Always something worse. And, yeah, you don't want to just drop it on them, but you can start laying hints in advance. Hey, I'm thinking about doing something different. I think we all ought to give it a try, just to freshen up our game and our approach, or whatever. Whatever works. What treasure type should I use for one Tim cask found in a dungeon lair? Oh, Oh, if you catch me in my lair, what treasure type? Um, Probably 12 rolls off any table you want. You can mix and match. I don't know. Um, I don't. I don't really follow the treasure type stuff anymore. I don't. I'm not. My design work isn't at that level. Um, I'll occasionally, for fun and games, look at it once in a while. Every couple of 3 years. But I'm not churning out regular adventures that have to be logical. I'm doing one-offs and I just don't use that. But it would undoubtedly have a lot of really neat looking stuff that was only marginally useful. But it was cool. It was neat. It looked good. Um, Third edition onward has the problem of 15-minute adventuring day, where wizard spells and other class abilities reset daily, so adventurers just rest for 24 hours or more after every combat encounter. Was this usually avoided in earlier editions, and if so, how? Well, yeah. For one thing, shit didn't reset in 24 hours. You could spend 2 weeks of game time recuperating, depending upon how many hit points you lost, which was, whatever interpretation of what they actually meant. Okay. But no, we didn't have that problem because I only had a single campaign going with a single set of characters. Gary's and Rob's in Lake Geneva, they kept a timeline, and so you couldn't be two places on the same day in the timeline or in the same week in the timeline. There's occasions where you got to keep track of that. There's occasions where you don't. I think that resets. It's not spells reset. It's the original concept was you needed to memorize those spells, not reset. That's crap. These things don't reset. You study. I mean, if I were to interpret that the way I think, you go in with 8 spells, and you stuck with them because they keep resetting. No, that one didn't work. Those 2 didn't get used. Fine, scrap them. Learn some. Memorize something else. Do what you have to do to get that spell in your wizard's head. Special abilities by character, we didn't have that kind of crap, so that wasn't a concern. And if a character got beat up, bunged up, lost 30-40% of their hit points, they weren't playing again the next day. And if a player character had a special ability, it generally had a once per day, whatever. Well, that is sort of automatic if it's a innate, built-in, native, intrinsic, whatever word you want to use, trait to that person, that race, that type of player character. You can do it there. But I'm not a fan. Hey, if that's what you're, if that's what you're playing, okay. I'm not a fan of that. I don't believe. Now, you can have an occasion where, and we did, where we would hole up because we were trapped. We were beat up. We needed to do, drink some potions and have the cleric pray over us and whatever, because we were being pursued, or we were too beat up to try to make it back up. So we'd go buff up limitedly, with limits. We'd buff up so that we could take on the second half or get our butts out of there and get back home alive. That said, that was a rare occasion. It usually drew wandering monsters. Now, I can tell you that if you played in one of the Lake Geneva campaigns and you said, I'm going to rest for 24 hours, and you weren't back in a very, very secure place like town or in a cave guarded with wards and everything, you weren't going to rest for 24 hours. That just didn't happen. If you were trespassing in a dungeon, well, whoever thought it was theirs knew. And then we're going to let you. We had to fort up. We had to put spells on doors to hold, and things like that. And it was a desperate measure. So I didn't see that as a problem. It was just an occasional thing that happened. Just a minute. I'm learning to prop myself up better so I don't look like I do look like I have a spine. We avoided it in early editions because that's not the way it worked in early editions. It just wasn't. So it wasn't a problem. Here's something I almost never see discussed. OD&D makes constant reference to Chainmail. Yes. While I understand that an alternative combat system was used right from the beginning, well, so for some of us, I didn't have Greyhawk, so when I taught the guys at college and myself how to play the game, we used the original crappy combat system where everything was a D6. It was still a hell of a lot of fun because it was about the storytelling and the problem solving. All right, we'll go back. While I understand that the alternative combat system was used right from the beginning, it does play as a different game without Chainmail. Some of Chainmail's nuances get lost in its absence. I know Gary has been famously quoted that they're different games, but are they really? Yes, they are. Whether they conflict, where they conflict, which one takes precedence. For example, enchanted arrows automatically hit normal figures in Chainmail. Yes, Chainmail is not individuals. Chainmail is units. The individual combat rules in Chainmail are crappy at best. So we're looking at apples and oranges here for one part. All right, automatically hit units. Well, units are big. They make 40 figures, whatever in a unit. And so, yeah, it's an attrition thing. All right, I'll continue here. For example, okay, I hit Chainmail, and again, only normal figures are affected by the paralysis of ghouls in Chainmail. Without the Chainmail reference, this becomes harder to interpret in OD&D, but it may be what led to tougher ghouls in AD&D. Everyone, except the elves, was affected. Granted, the language appeared in OD&D, but so did normal figure. How are these nuances dealt with play during the early days? Well, remember, we were loosey-goosey and horrible, and so we did a lot of interpretations. Now, how I interpreted it, or how we at Lake Geneva generally interpreted it, and I'm not saying that every one of us was in lockstep with everybody else in Lake Geneva. Before AD&D, we all ran games the way we like to run games, within the general parameters of the written rules at the time. Like most everything else, the latest published has precedent. Now, if you're playing AD&D, then that's what ghouls do. If you're playing OD&D, well, you got to figure out what ghouls do. And a good deal of the reason why AD&D was developed is because the combat in Chainmail is crappy. It was considered that OD&D was better and AD&D was better yet. Refinements on the thing. That's the way it evolved. And so that's the way it was played. I'm thrilled to hear about Twilight Fables. Once I discovered Appendix N and the other inspiration behind some of D&D's monsters, I confess I was slightly disappointed they weren't more faithfully adapted. Well, as you remember, I've made a couple of I've commented a couple of times. Gary, while Gary appreciated Tolkien's scholarship and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, he really didn't like the way Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings and the trilogy and Middle-earth, etc., which became the dominant figure in most people's minds as they're absorbing D&D. Oh, a dwarf. Oh, Gimli. Ooh, an elf. Legolas. And this is before the movies. So they're seeing whatever they saw in their minds as they're reading the books. Gary hated it. He didn't like it, but he was smart enough to know that that's what people wanted. That's what they saw. Let them have it. He'd much rather have the trickster dwarves of Northern European folklore, like you might find in a book I have over here called Fantasy something or other. The one I pumped on last week. Fantasy Fables? Twilight Fables, yes. Never mind. Yes, Twilight Fables. Let's see, where were we? Okay. I do understand copyright issues were at play. Yeah, there was that too. Still, but we've discovered several of them, like you find landmines, stepping on them. I guess, let's see. So, still, things from myth and folklore don't fall under that restriction. I'm very much an emulation gamer, so something like this really gets into the immersion I crave. It offers a way of crafting a campaign closer to legendary and even literary sources. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. You're very welcome. I think it's great. And I'm going to give you another little example at the end of this thing. I really think it is. Now, in this comment had a response from the person who made the game. They were nominated for an Emmy. They did not win, but the producer, the author, said that he was, very, very grateful for having been nominated. For the past year and a half, I've been rediscovering D&D via 5e after a 30-plus year break between my AD&D days and now. Wow, what happened? Were you in a coma? You did like a lot of us and decided to raise a family like I did. I got out for 20 years. All right, let's see. Okay, I apologize. I got to go back here and pick this up. During this time, I found that two behaviors from my fellow players that drive me the most nuts and harsh my fun: metagaming and power gaming. For the most part, I've seen metagaming fixed with one or two talking tos from the DM. Right. Take them aside. Hey, man, you can't do that. Play your character. Your character has an 11 intelligence, not 17. He doesn't know all these things. And that'll usually work. Because if you approach them correctly, if you know them well enough to know what correctly is, you can do it. I'm sure you can. However positive reinforcement you want to do to get them to change that behavior into something more appropriate. Let's see. But power gaming appears to be a much deeper pathology. Boy, I like that term. Immune to talking tos. It's really jarring to see players decide that a rules as written 5e character who's great at 2 or 3 things, just okay at everything else, and bad at nothing isn't good enough and needs to be turned into a walking first-level god with ridiculously broken homebrew abilities of their own creation that still spends half the game asking for rules exceptions. Oh, yeah, don't you hate it? I do. My half-joking, half-serious question to you is this. If I conducted interventions and shipped these guys off for a month or two at the Cask Institute for Power Gamer Rehab, what mandatory activities would you put them through to cure or lessen their affliction? What activities and items would be banned during their stay? Well, for one thing, I'd take away their sets of the rules. And of course, they have no electronic devices that they can pull them up on. They can't read them on their phone or anything. So for 2 weeks, the rules are what I say they are. Or my instructors, or my minions, or my slave drivers. But the rules are what I say they are. Get used to it. Everything doesn't work the same all the time. Get used to it. Oft-quoted example, my world. I have areas scattered around, small but important areas, where the ability to create magic, I call it mana in my world, the ability to create magic is very strong here. And small spells can get out of hand. The ability to create magic somewhere else is very weak there. Throw a fireball and you light a trash can. But those are aberrations. They're very few and far between. But they are different. Well, power gaming, power gaming is a disease. It does need some steps. There's one hard, brutal lesson you might use. Let them develop some crazy character, and then kill it. Do it by your rules. Create a monster even nastier, because there's always a monster that's nastier. There's always something that's immune to your special ability. Just like every monster I ever created always has a weak spot, a way to be overcome. It's no fun if you create monsters that don't have weaknesses, because then you're just creating engines to kill player characters, and I don't see that as any fun. Maybe you do, and that's okay, but not me. Power gaming. Just give them, I would give them, well, I don't know how many of you have seen Clockwork Orange. I prop their little eyes open and make them watch. Hugely leveled characters getting killed over and over again, and beat it into their head that everybody can die and should be able to die, and if you can't, it's crazy. And then I'd show them low-level guys succeeding against all odds, and I try to brainwash. Well, I'm fantasizing here. I don't really want to brainwash anybody, but I try to point out that there is a scale to everything. I've told the story about why we created gods, demigods, and heroes, because of the letter we got where some group had gone and wiped out Valhalla one weekend. It's a matter of scale. And there's always something bigger and badder and more terrifying. And so, what's the point of being super de-duper here? Because there's still shit that can take you out. Enjoy the struggle. Enjoy getting there. Then revel in it after you get there by earning it, not starting out like that. All right, that's enough of that lecture. Well, not actually a lecture, just some advice. That's what I would do. But I can't give you a blanket answer because I don't know your group. I don't know who has tender flower egos, who has tough leather egos, who can take, who can't. Okay, I should be preparing for tomorrow's sessions, but I'm bored and uninterested in the game and the 5e system. Are there any games of recommendation up your sleeve? At this point in time, I could really do with any setting, but can't bear the rules similar to 5e. Okay. It's 2 I can recommend. Dungeon Crawl Classic, Mutant Crawl Classic. They are role-playing. You do imagine that you're fighting with swords and you do roll a lot of dice and all that. But it's a different approach. It's a lot different approach. You can acquire luck. You can burn luck. Uh-oh, something awful happened. You got a little luck left. Oh, burn that luck. And, ooh, it almost happened, but it didn't. Now, there's a concept that's different from what we normally play in Swords and Sorcery type. Play a superheroes game. Then everybody's got a power. Not so special when everybody can do something cool. I often recommend finding a board game everybody can get into and doing a little more of the less intense gaming and getting to re-know your buddies that you've been playing with in a less formal, stressful, important, meaningful way. Just socialize again. Just socialize. My buddies and I, when we want to do something crazy, we either play Feudality or Scoville. One's a crazy, silly fantasy game, and the other's raising peppers and breeding peppers to get better peppers. And it's silly, but it's fun. And my pals and I around the table, pals, buddies, friends, all friends, we all interact with each other more than we interact through the game. So it's good socially to renew those contacts. 5e's way too permissive. Find something simpler. The homogenization of the races is just so pathetic. Game design. It gets really bad in the new Baldur's Gate 3 game. Larian knows game design, WotC does not, and I guarantee you the changes they did to Baldur's Gate 3 are due to WotC's execs interfering. Dwarves have the same movement penalty, 25 feet versus 30 feet. They get some dwarven weapons, and they get resistance to poison, but they don't get the +2s to strength and +2 to con. They get the generic +2 and +1 anywhere. There's no reason to play a dwarf now and deal with the movement penalty. It's just so tiring looking at what WotC is trying to come up with game design. It's like watching a puppy trying to figure out how to open up a can of dog food. They just can't do it. 5e is 2e recycled with a bunch of heroic feats that make death an improbability. Okay, at that point 2e was a pretty good cleanup of first edition. Yeah, there are a few tinkers, but there was a lot of correction and cleanup and editing and typos gotten rid of. I'd say it's more like 3, I almost said it. The edition that shall not be named, or the .5 edition that came after it that shall either not be named. But anyway, I digress. Where are we? It showed, okay, like a puppy tried to figure out how to open a can. Okay, they can't do it. Recycled a bunch of heroic feats that make death an improbability. That's the part I really hate. But at least Merle's 5e felt different enough between the races. The new 5e is pretty bland and generic. It's like drinking a Coke that sat out for 5 days on the windowsill. Now, this one got, before I respond to that, this one got some responses of its own. And I'm going to regurgitate a couple of them here. I love 2e. Your description of 5e is painfully accurate. Next one. I'd say the bones of 5e is 3e light. That, yes. I find no redeeming qualities at all in 2e or 4e. What about 3.5? 4, no, that was just a damn pinball. That was a pinball game on the tabletop that, well, or video game trying to act. It was awful. It's hard to find words for how bad it was. The new 5e, bland and generic, okay. Sat 5 days on the windowsill. Whew. Yeah. And so the last one I chose to address is for 2e, not even the artwork. Some adventures were pretty good as well. 4e was garbage, and so is 5. It's what's printed here, not what I'm saying. No, I'm free to agree with any of it. Being quirky, having different movement rates in the party was always fun because you got to go as slow as the slowest guy. So having a dwarf in the party meant that the party was going to be comparatively slow compared to just humans and elves, for instance. And if it was a lot of elves, it was fast. But having different abilities, one of the things that I thought was so great about dwarves in the early rules was their innate ability to detect slopes. It was really handy to have a dwarf in the party when you were exploring underground somewhere new. Really handy. Now everything's kind of generically everything else. Like we were talking about last week, everybody wants a hero that can throw a little magic on the side. Crap. Not the way I like to play. If you like it, that's okay, but hey, I got a bridge I'll sell you. Or come play in my Wheel of Blame sometime. We'll do it different. I agree that there seems to be a disturbing lack of consistency coming out of the Wizards. Not just their game design, but their whole, first screw with the OGL. Oh, nope, don't screw with the OGL. And now, what have they done? They've foisted off a big B book on the public full of AI art. Now, who's to blame? The artists who used AI and didn't tell them? The art director who didn't catch it? The art director who didn't ask, is it or isn't it? Now, the artist has claimed that all he did was use it to buff, which I find odd because I've had 3 people that have worked as art directors tell me that they could see where it was wrong. Wrong proportions, wrists bending the wrong direction, things like this. So really, what can we expect from the Hasborg? Now they're going to do away with creatives and use AI crap? See, this gets to the argument about AI. Why is the original author able to feed it into a program that's looked at all the other artwork it can find on the web and then buff his by learning from and copying of all that other stuff? I think AI art is part, I think non-AI art is part of the soul, the beating heart of gaming. I just, how much money are you actually going to save by having a machine draw your pictures as opposed to having an artist's interpretation? It's what it's all about, isn't it? Interpreting. It's what the DM does. He interprets how to describe what's going on. The players interpret what he's saying and decide how they're going to react. Describe a scene to an artist and ask him to paint it, and he's going to give you his interpretation. Not some machine. His. A living human. Or hers, excuse me. Once again, I remind you, I'm subject to old pronouns. It's what was beaten into me. Well, let's see. I was probably 65 some years ago. It started pounding in me. So I still have that bad habit. Because I know, and I feel really bad because I know a lot of really good lady artists. Really good. I've used several of them back when I was with Eldridge. Yeah, it's Wizards. It's Hasborg. It's soulless. Okay, on the topic of races having certain bonuses and not having similar and balanced traits with one another, I agree that a dwarf should be penalized for their speed compared to an elf, or that a human has better traits when it comes to being more adaptive, depending upon the edition you're playing. However, just to play devil's advocate, to be able to choose where to put your ability score increases could be thought as the individual strengths, and WotC is implemented on races, so trying to find an explanation to it is hard. My experience of tabletop RPGs is still little, but what I can agree on is that 5e is incoherent. The whole ideal of being able, well, a little grammar here. The whole idea of being able to be used in any setting and being woke as possible, and also WotC not knowing their own product and the community is its downfall. Well, you might be right. Okay, now, close your eyes a minute. Just listen. We're going to have a little encounter. I'm going to do my eyeballs boosted here. Oh, yes, there it is. All right. Okay, I gotta get back here. All right. Your party of 4 is making its way down through a valley that probably hasn't seen any humans in quite some time. It's just thickly overgrown, lush, verdant, flowers everywhere. Plants, squirrels, birds, butterflies. It's just untouched. And then you spy something out of the corner of your eye. Movement. It's not a bear. It's not an elk. It's not a moose. It looks to be an impossibly large bipedal humanoid. 10 feet tall at least. very thick, stout body, wearing what looks to be handmade scale armor of a sort, and exuding a stench that is eye-wateringly foul. You each spot each other at roughly the same moment. Roll for initiative. Wow, giant, huh? Ooh, okay, giant. So many hit points, yada da da da. All right, no, actually it's not. That was an A thought. All right, it was an A thought. And it's thick-skinned humanoid type giants that are very slow-witted, and they like to live in caves, and they have a weakness for honey. Okay? These come from Scottish Gaelic folklore. But if you had assumed them to be regular giants, you'd be in some deep kimchi about now. If you'd thought that you were going to possibly be meeting some of these buggers, maybe you brought up a flask of honey, because they're suckers for honey and will do almost anything for a measure of honey. Twilight Fables. Fae. The world of Fae. Gaelic, Welsh, many other Slav, German. There's stuff in there that I've never heard of. And it's the ideal for putting your party on their toes. Either pluck one out and drop it in, or transport them, teleport them, whatever, into a slightly different realm full of Fae. Now it's education time. You don't have to set the a thought on them first, because they'll probably kill them all. But you can get them with some brownies and some pixies and some stuff that's non-lethal but still a pain. Okay, now I'm going to digress a minute. This is my car. It's a Schuco. It's the SCHUCO. The Schuco Examico 4001. Schuco Patent Auto 4001. Made in the U.S. zone, Germany. Now that'll tell you how old it is. All right? Before, not the, okay, in the U.S. zone, Germany. Not West Germany, Germany. Okay? It's beautiful. It has a dashboard that has a little speedometer. Now it's all painted on. I've lost the celluloid. The reason I'm so wound up about this, bad pun, is I got a key. I had to order a key because I had lost mine. This little car that was made how many years ago? I was probably 8, 9 when my uncle came back from Germany in the Air Force and gave me this and my brothers 2 other different kinds of cars that got trashed. I have no idea why this didn't, except that I always thought it was cool because it has something I've never seen in a wind-up toy before. 5 forward speeds, or pardon me, 4 forward speeds, reverse, a clutch, and a handbrake, and it still works. They must have made a gazillion of them, because when I finally got around to looking it up a few weeks ago, I thought, ooh, I got a really great old car. Well, I do, but it's not worth nearly as much as I hoped. But I probably wouldn't have gotten rid of it anyway. But I'm chuffed. As the Brits would say, I'm chuffed. Gary Kahn, belt buckle, going to a good friend. I think that's all I got for today. Yep, I guess it is. So, at that note, quit glaring, take the glare out of my eyes. I think I'm going to go play with my car. Except I'm not. Can't think of anything else to talk about. That's odd. So I guess I'll just have to say, Dodada Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's a curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.
Aha, I'm back. Because I forgot to add that you can get a Scientific Barbarian hat or a Scientific Barbarian shirt by puppygames.com, and the information for this wonderful Twilight Fables book will also be available. And on that note, I'll say Dodada Gobi again.